What was interesting about my situation then is I both had a corporate hat on and an academic hat on. And I started seeing the misconceptions of both sides of the fence. With my academic hat on, I could see how corporate work could seem distasteful and self-serving and commercial to the point of being intellectually bankrupt. And with my corporate hat on, I could understand the misperception of how academic work could seem hermetic and arcane and impractical to the point of being utterly useless. Well, what I hope to show today is, to dispel both sides of the curtain and to show something that's both scholarly and practical. So in the course of my research around design and emotion, I came across a lot of surprises. And in fact, it challenged a lot of my presumptions going into this. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is pretty counterintuitive. In fact, it's kind of the opposite of a lot of what we think or presume about emotion and design. In fact, so much so, in all of art and literature, nothing captures this sort of counterintuitive feeling more so, nothing expresses it more so than this clip from the Annals of Seinfeld. So keep that in mind when I get later into my talk, that a lot of this will be pretty much the opposite, and it works. And this kind of builds up to a framework that my team and I use called the two-factor design theory, and I'm going to be going into further detail about it with you. So let me start even further back. I'm going to tell this as a story. So let's go back to the year 2001. In 2001, I was living in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I was working for Philips Design. And like all Americans, well, all foreigners who are living in Holland, we have to register with this organization, which is the Police for Foreigners. It's kind of their immigration office. And in Amsterdam, this office, the precinct for this was on a street with this name. And so like a good new arrival to a foreign country, I decided to look up who this guy that they named a street after was, and his name is Johan Huizinga. And it turns out that Huizinga is considered the greatest 20th century Dutch historian. And his seminal work is something called Homo Ludens, which means the being that plays. And what Huizinga suggests is that the element of play was something very central to culture, and things like ritualized combat and theater and religious rituals are all born out of this element of play. And in fact, play has kind of gotten trivialized throughout history, but now with the advent of networked communications and digital communications, scholars today suggest that the Homo Ludens is now realized, that we are now in a kind of playful, ludic age. And we could see that by the way we communicate with each other, with the internet and with mobile phones and texting and so forth. This kind of behavior actually resembles the communication patterns that children have when they play with each other on the playground. Now, this whole notion of play, this concept of play, is so important today that it's actually one of the 6 aptitudes that Daniel Pink, in his book, A Whole New Mind, says defines the era in which we're about to enter. And he says the society is shifting. We're going from the information age to the conceptual age. And there are 3 reasons why: Asia, abundance, and automation. And out of these 3 reasons, the one that's most important to our discussion today is that of abundance. Pink said that after World War II, the industrialized West enjoyed a standard of living unprecedented in all of human history. And as part of, to support this example, he cited the so-called American dream, which at one time was to have, to own a home and have a car. He says today, some 2/3 of Americans own the home in which they live, and another 13% actually own a second home. And as for cars, in the United States, there are more cars than licensed drivers, suggesting that anyone who knows how to drive owns the means by which to do so. Well, what happens with this abundance is that we have an abundance of choice. Here's a pasta aisle in a New York grocery store. So the thing is, with all these choices that we're faced with today, that we start making our consumer decisions, and actually our everyday decisions, based on less rational sensibilities, based on things like beauty and spirituality and emotion, or what Virginia Pastoral in her book, The Substance of Style, calls the aesthetic imperative. And this is where emotion is starting to gain importance in the future of design. See, the sum of this is that as humans start worrying less and less about things like where our next meal is coming from, or finding shelter, or running away from dinosaurs, what this does is it creates free time. And technology actually helps create and increase the amount of free time that we have every day. And so as free time starts increasing more and more, what do we do in that free time? We start asking ourselves more metaphysical questions, things like, what's the meaning of life, or why am I here? It kind of feels like my midlife crisis coming on, but really, the free time actually allows us to all become much more introspective. And then so what happens is, as technology becomes more ubiquitous, and as free time becomes more ubiquitous, we start hitting a tipping point where society is experiencing a shift from being a material society to an immaterial society. And we see some of this discussion in the business press, like with Pine and Gilmore's work, where they talk about the experience economy, where it suggests that people today, rather than buying things for the actual functional utility, that we buy things for how they make us feel. And the actual functional utility is just kind of an excuse. Because otherwise, if we didn't, really we would just look across any sort of sector where there's a particular set of functions and just buy the cheapest thing. But as we all know, being Americans who drive cars, the car you choose has less to do with its function than what it does about how it makes us feel or how it impacts our identities. So in this kind of immaterial society, in this experience economy, and we ask ourselves, what is the role of products and services? Or in a more scholarly term, what is the role of objects? Well, I'm bringing up this guy. This is Peter Sloterdijk. He's a professor at the University of Karlsruhe. He's a philosopher. And he's a bit of a controversial figure in the sense that he rejects this whole notion of dualisms. And dualisms are things that we consider to be cognitively paired, but two discrete elements, two separate elements. Things like body and soul, or culture and nature, or the subject and the object. And what Sloterdijk suggests is rather than these things all being separate, that they actually persist in spaces of coexistence. This is a heavy-duty thing, especially at 8 in the morning. The thing is, today, these dualisms actually aren't really separate. Like the example here is we see a carpenter building something. And one of these dualisms is around work and play. See, the thing is, this could be a carpenter whose daily vocation is building things. Or it could be a software developer who has a little carpentry shop in his garage, and this thing that we traditionally thought of as work is actually a play or a recreational activity. So you see even the notions of work and play kind of persist in our day-to-day lives.